All right, the next part of the early years, we're going to get into the disciplinary. We're going to get into the proper correction and discipline. This is a humongous section, so bear with me. This is probably, this is going to go long. I'm looking at it. I have a lot of notes, but this is like the stuff that people really want, right? This is the things that they're really after. But I think we have to have the core foundations first so that proper correction and discipline actually works, so that we know why we're disciplining them. We know why we're correcting them. We have like an intent behind it, if that makes sense. Like we're not just doing it because we're supposed to, because the Bible says to. Yes, of course, we're supposed to, the Bible says to, yes. But have some direction with it. Our goal is to train up a child in the way they should go. What's their bend? What's the arrow? Which direction are we guiding them? Which direction are we shooting them? You are their authority. I know I keep saying this. You've got to be proactive. You've got to be the one enforcing the rules, the one enforcing the love, the one, showing the love, the grace, all of those things. You are the example. And again, dads, I keep coming back to you because we can be really heavy-handed when it comes to discipline. It's true. We really can. And moms will really lose their patience, I've noticed. Like moms will definitely because moms don't really have that authority, that booming voice, that demeanor about them. They weren't really created that way as man was, right? So, and I'm not saying moms can't do that. We've seen kind of the funny stories. You've probably seen these videos on like TikTok and Facebook and whatnot, social media, with the moms with their slippers and their shoes and their this and that, and they'll throw it from the room or whatever it may be. But, from personal experience, I was far more terrified when I knew my dad was going to spank me than when my mom was going to spank me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, something about it. And don't get me wrong. Like, again, I think moms can respond really aggressively because they lose that control and they lose their patience with them and this and that and the other. But dads can probably keep it under control, but they will get angry about it. And you don't want to be angry about it, because of the whole respect and authority thing. So anyways, enough about that. Let's just jump right in to this section. I probably already read this, but let's just read it again. Proverbs 1. There's that book again. Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. There will come a point where your kids will get too old and they will be too foolish for correction, and that means you've missed the opportunity. That's why this is all so important in the early years. Like, when do I start spanking my child? When do I start correcting them and disciplining them? And I probably actually don't have that in my notes. I actually just thought about this, but I'll try to touch on it here in a moment. But all I'm simply saying is we don't want to let our kids get past the point of no return. We have to do it early on, early in their life. Okay? Very, very important. The first 5 years is so important. And and I will say this. See, I said I wasn't going to touch on it, but maybe I should. I've corrected my children as early as like 8 or 9 months old. Do I spank them? No. I do little things like, this is going to sound mean, but we're going to get into the verses, so just bear with me, please. Like with my kids, I've squeezed like their hands, right? And I've let them just get a little pressure on them when they were little, hey, this ain't okay. Just a little, like there's pain points right here. And I'm not about bringing pain to my kids. I'm not. But at the same time, I know that it's going to bring guidance, correction, and discipline. And there may be better ways, but I still try to I line up with the Word of God. I line up what the Word of God says. But all that to say is, but once they were hitting like 1 or 1.5 or 2, yes, little swats here and there on the little behinds. They're little chubby little behinds. Little swats that are happening early on. Just minor things. Again, I'm not trying to beat them. I'm not trying to abuse them. And I'm very against those things, which again, we'll get into. I'm very, very against those things. Heavy hands. I've already said it. I'm against it. But anyways, all that to say, I'm getting sidetracked. I'm getting ahead of myself. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So yes, there needs to be a fear that's instilled into them, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. I make sure to tell my kids all the time, do not act foolishly. Allow me to correct you. Allow me to discipline you. I'm doing it for your benefit. How many of us, like, I don't know about the generation now, I feel like they are so weak and so soft and they get hardly any of the correction that we got. And you probably hear this from generation to generation. You get the kids that worked in the coal mine and then, it came from there, and then the Great Depression and all this, that, and the other. They had it hard. They had it really hard growing up. I think I was easier, like my generation was easy, but we still got whooped. We still got our butt spanked, and it still happened to us. And then I look at my girls and some of these kids today, I'm like, they need some whoopings. They need some spankings. And you'll see this all over social media, the old heads and the older crowd, and speaking to the younger crowd, how easy they got it. But where was I going with that? All that to say is because I don't want my kids growing up foolish. And so, that's what I was going to say. Like, my parents, my dad especially, told me this all the time. I do it because I love you. And as a kid, you're like, what? This is the total opposite of love. This doesn't feel like love whatsoever. Again, we'll dive into those verses. I'm getting way ahead of myself. So, all right. Moving on. Proverbs 9:10. I could talk about this section a lot, as you probably could tell. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Hey, this sounds familiar. And the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So again, we want to instill a sense of fear, but it's a healthy fear. There is a healthy fear I think people can have. If you're standing on the top of a cliff, you know not to get to the edge. Right? That's a healthy fear. No, I don't think we should walk in fear. In 1 John, perfect love casts out fear. Totally agree with that statement. But that's referring to God, right? That's referring to him. And yet, this seems contradictory. Wait, the fear of the Lord, there's a reverence. There's a healthy fear knowing, I've already said this, that God could squish me like a bug. But he doesn't desire to. That's not really what he wants. I just know that he could, but I know that he doesn't desire that. That's not his intention, right? But yes, in the New Testament, whom the Lord loves, he corrects. We're going to hit this verse here in a minute. So just know we're instilling a little bit of fear in our kids, but it's out of reverence. It's so they don't end up foolish and so that they can gain humility and understanding. Okay? That's the purpose of the actual correction and the actual discipline, to actually show them love. And even in this, again, I'm probably jumping ahead. They've done surveys over kids who were not corrected, over kids who were not disciplined, especially males. They were doing this. And when those kids would be like 20, 25 years old, whatever, after their teenage years and whatnot, and they will tell them, they're like, what's one thing you wish your dad or your parent would have done? And they said, I wish you would have disciplined me. And that's profound because, again, I think I already mentioned this about Job. Like, he probably spoiled his kids a lot. Like, Samson was heavily spoiled. And you see this and you see the outcome of their lives and that they just did whatever they wanted to. But now after serving these young adults and college-age kids, and we find that they were actually disappointed and they saw their peers or their friends or whatever that got corrected, and they were actually, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but they wish that they would have got the same thing. Again, I'm not talking about abuse. That's a completely different thing. And that is not okay. That is not okay. I'll talk about that. But so yeah, bear that in mind. Like, what you're doing with your kids is going to bless them later. And as adults, I think all of us, except for those of us who were abused, and I'm so sorry if that happened to you, but all of us can relate to that and be like, you know what? My dad, my mom was doing, I get it now. I got kids. I get it now. The Bible says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction will drive it from them. That verse echoes in my head. When I see my kids acting foolish, I know correcting them will drive that foolishness from them. And that is the goal. I don't want them to be foolish. I want them to be wise. I want them to have the fear of the Lord. I want them to gain knowledge and understanding. Okay, getting ahead of myself. All right. So I already said this. Whom the Lord loves, he corrects. So let's go to Hebrews 12:6. My son, do not despise the chastising of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, and scourges every son whom he receives. It goes on to say, if you enduring chastising, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening or correcting, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them what? Respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? For they indeed for a few days chastened us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now, chastising seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So, all that to say is, yes, God is correcting us. This has to do with, obviously, our righteousness and humility with the Lord, and just being in faith, like just being his sons and daughters. And no, I don't think God is looking out for ways to correct us, and we're going to get into the grace of all of this. But at the same time, we can clearly see it's evident that God does correct us, that God does discipline us. He chastises us. He wants to make sure that we are profiting. It says it in verse 10, but he for our profit, that we can be partakers of his holiness. And that's what we want at the end of the day, to be holy as I am holy, to walk in holiness. No, we're not ever going to be perfect, of course, but yes, we want to walk uprightly. We want to walk in righteousness. And it says in verse 11 that it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness. And that's where you can see when people have been chastised by the Lord or by their parents, you can see usually they'll walk in peace. They walk in humility. They walk in control. They walk in reverence. They have a healthy fear. They have these understandings. So I only bring that up because as we get into this section, know that this is not just me, a man who was created in the image of God, who just likes to just discipline his kids. God is the example of these things. And we can see it time and time again in the Old Testament. And we can also see where the Lord lost his patience and he had to, relinquish from that and correct himself and whatever, But anyways, so let's keep moving on. I also have it written down, Proverbs 3, 11, and 12. And that may be where these verses actually were quoted, because Hebrews 12 is actually quoting from the Old Testament. So let's go to that real quick. My son, do not despise the chastising of the Lord, nor detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as the Father in the Son of whom he delights. So yeah, so that's where this was pulled from. So there you go. Okay, let's get into some of these nitty gritties. I've got a lot of notes written down. Most of the stuff I'm trying to stick to the Bible, and I'm just kind of sharing my heart. But I do have some things that I wanted to share that I wrote down. The first part of all of this, proper correction and proper discipline is you've got to establish right and wrong before even correcting, because otherwise, like you'd rather, how do I say this? Like, I believe even from biblical example, and that's why I think God repented at times, is because he didn't have this established first. He just came out with wrath. And then he was like, oh shoot, you know what? I probably didn't say this first. But no, like even in the Garden of Eden, right? We can go all the way back to Genesis. God established a rule, one very simple rule. Don't eat from this fruit. And he only told it to Adam. And then it was Adam's job, of course, to tell it to Eve. That's a different conversation. But nevertheless, he couldn't correct them if he hadn't given the instruction. And to be perfectly honest, this is why I have a little bit of an issue when it comes to Cain and Abel. Because unless there's something we don't know about, which I'm assuming that there is, because it still seemed like these are the first human beings on the planet, it still seemed like God was heavily active in their lives. He was still there showing up with them. Maybe he wasn't walking with them, but he was still active because Cain clearly had a conversation with God and it was like no big deal. Like I couldn't even imagine that. Like, anyways, my point is so there may be something that happened in between. But I say that because Cain got punished for murdering his brother. But did he know it was wrong? I'm not sure. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not really sure. Clearly, they knew about giving a tithe, a tenth of their goods, the fruits and vegetables. And then Abel brought the lamb or whatever it was, the animal. So clearly, they knew that they were supposed to do that. So again, nowhere in Genesis does it even mention these things, but it clearly happened. So I don't know. I'm rambling on, but my point is we've got to show We've got to establish right and wrong. So please, and I've seen this with parents, they will correct a child, and I'm like, did they know that they weren't supposed to do it? Well, no, but I don't want them doing it. Okay, well, establish the rule and the baseline first. Make sure you establish this thing first and say, hey, this is not okay. This thing that you just did, I see what you did. You didn't know it was not okay. They're kids. Remember, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. So they don't know these things yet. You've got to teach them, educate them, and learn them, right? So the first time it happens, then you can establish that rule. Now, maybe you establish the rule before it happens. That's obviously perfectly fine, just like the Garden of Eden. But if it doesn't happen and then it happens and you get upset by it, hey, hold your thought there, hold your tongue. Yeah, you want to correct them, pull them aside, however you want to do it. We don't discipline them yet. We're going to establish the rule first, and we're going to say, hey, this thing that you just did, let me explain it to you. This is why it's wrong. This is why I don't want you to do it. The next time you do it, here's going to be the consequence. Does that make sense? So, all right. And then I mentioned about changing the environment or changing the child. There are many situations, and I'm kind of establishing these as baselines because there's this phrase that's out there, and I don't even know if I have it typed up. I need to find this phrase and say this. You want to change their will without quenching their spirit. So again, what do I mean by a lot of this is as we're correcting them, you can tell when a kid is losing heart. You can tell. I've seen this with like 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-old kids. And I will go to the parent and I will let them know. I'm like, hey, you're losing your kid. It's way, way too early. You should never lose your kid, but you're way too early for this. I get that you're trying to instill things. I get you're trying to correct them. I get you want them a certain way. I get all of that. I do. Truly, I do. But break their will without breaking their spirit. That's the phrase. Break their will without breaking their spirit. Because once they've lost their spirit, they can't do anything right. They can't see themselves doing good. They can't see themselves attaining or proving their love. Like they can't earn your love. And once it's got to that point, it's so sad. And you've got to flip the script and not be so heavy-handed. And you've got to absolutely smother them in love to earn that back and then find that balance. But anyway, so what I meant by changing the environment and changing the child. So there's situations where clearly we know our kids have a certain there's a certain personality trait about them. Like maybe they're going to grow up to be a lawyer, right? Maybe they're going to grow up to be a sports player. So they've got to be confident and stuff, or they got to, like, you don't want them to be arrogant. You don't want them to be cocky, but you want them to be confident, right? So, okay, we want to change part of that, but maybe we need to change, some of that, and then some of that we need to keep, right? But maybe it's an environment thing. And what I mean by an environment thing is like sometimes they're hanging around with the wrong crowd. And we can see that that's influencing your child's behavior. And you can tell when they go over to so-and-so's house, all of a sudden they come back acting a certain way. Well, I don't want to keep spanking them over and over and over again because of the same thing, because it's being influenced by a third party. I may need to change the environment in that situation. And again, you'll have to feel that out. You have to pray those things through and you have to fill it out. I get it. They're going to grow up in the world. And you're like, well, you can't control the world. You can't put them in a bubble. I agree with you. I do. But bad company corrupts good morals. So I want to make sure that my kids are surrounded by good people. I don't want them going down the path of unrighteousness. Again, read the book of Proverbs. There's plenty of these verses that talk about this, where bad influence will have bad results. So yes, you can control that situation and you can teach them. Now, if they go to that friend's house and you teach them this thing and you say, hey, I see that you're doing or acting a certain way when you leave this friend's house. If you want to keep being friends with this person, you be the bigger person. You act a certain way. I've taught you this way. You can influence them. They don't need to be influencing you. And that's a different way to approach it. Then you don't need to change the environment if they are coming back and acting the way that you have instructed them, right? But other environments, it's like, what if like, I don't know, let's say you put your kid in a sport and you expect all this stuff out of him, and maybe it's baseball. I can't stand baseball. I've played it. I played a lot of team sports, and I did play like 1 year of baseball. But it's not my thing. My point is let's say you put your kid in a t-ball because you loved baseball growing up and it was your thing, and I'm going to make my kid play baseball. And you clearly see they just suck at it, or you clearly see it is not their thing. Maybe they're a soccer player, maybe they're a football, whatever. Doesn't matter. But you can clearly see it's not them. But you keep trying to correct them to like it and to appreciate it and to do this, that, and the other and be like, you need to be good at baseball. I'm going to make you good. You need to change the environment. Why are you trying to change a child? That is not the direction they're supposed to be going. So I don't need to give you more examples, but you kind of get it. You either need to learn when to change the environment or change the child. Okay? So bear all of these things in mind as you are correcting your kid. Okay? Another thing that I mentioned is non-negotiables and judging. Like, it's easy for us to judge our kids and look at things, but I always say, look at the spirit behind it. Too quickly, I see this in adults and other people. I'm just like, people get so bad out of shape or offended by things. Like, I know I'm that person. I do not try to offend people. I really don't. I don't care what people think about me. I generally don't care what people think, like, in general, of how I act or function or what have you, because my confidence is in the Lord, my whatever is in the Lord. But yes, I take heart to people, and I don't want to offend them. I don't want to hurt their feelings. That's not my intent, and that's not my goal. But why am I saying that is because many times people will judge me on things that I'll say or do, but they don't know the heart behind it. They're judging me incorrectly. And instead of like looking at the spirit or the heart behind it, they're just like, oh, he said this thing or he acted, that just must be. And then if I'm able to correct that in that moment, like if they bring it up, if they're confident enough to bring it up, most people don't, then they go and they get offended and then they never talk to you again or whatever. Come on, you guys, let's grow up. Let's be mature. We have communication for a reason. We're able to talk for a reason. Anyways, but all this to say is sometimes you got to look at the heart behind what your kid is doing. And that's very, very important. There are people who have the right motives, but it comes out wrong and it comes out horrible. And then there are people who have the wrong motives and they do it in such a kind way. And you're like, wow, this person's so nice. But behind them, they have evil motives. So all that is, you know your kids, get to know them, understand them, ask the questions. Sometimes, after you correct them or what have you, they may defend themselves. And we might touch on this, but they may defend themselves. And they may clarify and be like, Dad, I was doing it because of this. And then you're like, I feel bad. Okay, all right, I apologize. I shouldn't have corrected you. And I have had to apologize to my kids many, many times where they will clarify something. But usually I'll correct them first. Sometimes I'll ask them up front. I will get clarification because now I know. I'll say, why did you do this thing? What was the point of this? Right? And I can tell when they're lying. I can tell when they're trying to get out and skirt out. That's the difference. You got to be wise about these things. And if you're not sure, well, maybe just give them a little spank and just be like, look, I wasn't sure. I'm going to spank you just for good faith, okay? I want you to do the right thing. All right, let's just do the right thing next time, okay? And you'll fill that out. But like, I was thinking of an example, and it just slipped my mind. I had this example. I don't know what it was. It's okay for my own life. And yeah, but anyways, but like non-negotiable. Like, there are certain things you want that are non-negotiable. You know that I don't want you lying. I don't want you doing this certain thing. This is a non-negotiable. Whereas there's other things that may be negotiable, right? Like, if you don't want your kids making messes, that's a pet peeve of mine, like my kids spilling and making messes and wasting things. I'm not a fan of that stuff. But like, I say this in all reverence, my mom, she would get so angry and upset. Not my dad so much, but my mom. My dad, I guess, with other things, I guess. I'm thinking like in the garage, there were certain things like he would get upset about if we broke something or what have you. But yeah, my mom would get really upset if we spilt something or if we broke something or if we made a mess or whatever. She gets so upset by these things. And it's ironic now because my mom, with her grandkids, they make messes and she's like, let them be. It's fine. You can clean it up. I'm like, yeah, where was that when we were kids? Seriously? Ugh. Anyways, but whatever. Grandparents are totally hypocrites. I'm just going to say that. Grandparents are complete hypocrites. Okay? I'm just going to say that. All right? Anyway, but yeah, but I have to be careful with that with my girls, right? They want to learn how to pour the milk. And I'll get to this. Like, I'm going to hold their hand in the process, but they're pouring the milk. Like my daughter Isabella, and I felt bad. And yes, there were times, and I had to humble myself because I realized I was wrong. And I would correct her out of frustration because she would get into the fridge and then she'd spill a bunch of stuff. And I hate wasting food. I hate spilling. I hate cleaning up messes. I really do. If you know me, I don't like that stuff. I would lose it with her, not out of anger, but I would get frustrated with her, and I'd have to come back and the Lord's like, it wasn't her fault. Like, be patient with your daughter. And I'm like, and I would cry and I would get sad and I'd get upset and I'd go apologize to her. I'm like, baby, I'm so sorry. You were hungry. I wasn't feeding you, or, you clearly weren't telling me you were hungry, or whatever, or I was taking a shower or something and you were just looking to get some food, and it would happen. So all that to say is like, I guess I was talking about non-negotiables and like judging their heart. They were kind of hand in hand because yes, there are certain things that are non-negotiables, but there are some things you just got to give grace and patience to. We're going to touch on this. I know I'm getting ahead. I'm all over the place. Stuff is just spinning in my brain. I got like all these trains and channels running right now. And I just want to spit it all out. So forgive me. But anyway, so the next part of all of this is, oh yeah, allowing them to express their feelings and emotions. So being able to shape those things, shaping their feelings and emotions, because again, you're not training robots. They are autonomous. We want them to be themselves. And this goes back to like quenching their spirit. They're not going to be themselves anymore. And you don't want that. Like, you really don't want that. You want them to be who they were created to be. Like, I get it. Like, you take an example of a dog. I'm not a fan of dogs, if you know me. I don't like dogs. But I see how owners are with their dogs, right? And you've got some of these owners who will send them to like doggy school or whatever it is, and they just want their dogs absolutely submissive and obedient and never to bark or never to do this or never to do that. They basically, I'm like, why do you even have a dog? You don't want them acting like a dog. So why did you even get a cat or something? Get a rabbit. I don't know. Get something else. But clearly you don't want a dog because the barking, the biting, the begging, the digging, the chewing, it's literally in their nature. This is what dogs do. Like, this is what they do. Now, again, I'm not saying you can't correct and teach your dog to be obedient and this and that and whatever, but I don't know. So it kind of goes along with that verse, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. So yes, our kids are naturally foolish, right? So we've got to discern that and discern that we're not like taking away their spirit, not quenching their spirit, not changing who they are. I've seen this in my own life and I don't like it. And I've said this to my wife and many people like in my circle, they've asked me different questions. And these are people that didn't know me who I was like 20 years ago. And I've always said, like, I like the person who I was 20 years ago. And people are like, what? What? That means you're not growing. You're not maturing. You're not this. You're not... Whatever. Like, yes and no. But no, what I mean by that is because many people have come into my life and have tried to mold me into their personality and tried to make me who they are. And they've tried to make me their protege. And I don't like that. I don't like that one bit because I look at God and God allows us to be who we are. We go back to Jeremiah. We go back to Isaiah. We go back to these things and we see even David was set apart and God allowed him to be who he was. And I think that's so important because, yes, in the midst of our correcting and disciplining our kids, please allow them to be who they are. Yeah, we don't like the dog example. Sure, we don't want them barking at people. We don't want them biting. But if an intruder comes into your home, we've known those dogs where they're like, yeah, what is it? Their bark is bigger than their bite, I think people say. And yeah, we've seen those dogs and they're barking, but then you go to pet them and they turn into this little sloppy mess and they're just like all sweet and loving and lick you. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But so yeah, you probably want, and if an intruder came into your home, you probably want the dog to bite them and to bark at them and to attack them because that's what dogs are designed to do in some regards. But if you train them in such a way that they can't even respond that way, then what good are they, man? Whatever. But same analogy with the kids, like same thing. So I don't need to keep beating that up. That's all. Just shape it, guide it. Like Zoe, my little one, she has an anger issue that we've been dealing with, and we are shaping it. I am shaping it. I am making sure that anger is not okay. But I see the little leader in her. I see the bossiness coming out of her, and that there are times that is applicable, and I want her to be able to utilize that. So I don't want to rob her of that trait, but I want to mold it and shape it and make sure that she knows when it's applicable, when she can use it. But just throwing yourself on the ground and being angry and screaming at people and calling them names and using harsh words is not okay. And I will be hard pressed on that one and I will correct you. But I will say, hey, there's a time to stand up for yourself. Absolutely. Don't allow yourself to be trampled. Don't allow yourself to be run over, what have you. There's a time for that. And she may be an advocate for people later on in life. And that may be her thing. And she has to be bold and fierce and stand up and use that kind of fierceness and anger in a positive way. I don't know. I'm not sure yet. But I know right now it's not okay. the way that she's using it at this time to abuse her older sister and try to beat her up and say harsh words to her and be mean to her. That's not okay. Or when we correct her and she storms off and tries to slam the door, that ain't okay, kid. That is one of the hard and fast rules for me. But all while I'm doing this, there's a lot to take in. I'm still shaping and molding. I'm not doing it out of anger. I'm not heavy-handed about it. I'm correcting it in real time. She knows that this is something that is a problem, and I don't let it slide. It's a non-negotiable for me, all right? Anyways, so yeah, enough about that. Yeah, so those are some of the notes I had as we get into more of this, and I'm probably regurgitating a lot of it. So I already said this. You want to change their will without quenching their spirit. Here's a phrase I love, and this is from a minister, a well-known minister, and he says, in your dealings with your children, there will definitely be correction and guidance, but you never want your children to fear you or be insecure about your love and acceptance for them. Fear and insecurity will only lead to hatred, and it's so true. If your children fear you in an unhealthy fear, they will grow up hating you. And that is the biggest thing we're trying to avoid. The psalm comes to mind. I'll read this really quick, and then we'll wrap up. Psalm 38, verse 1. O Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. So David recognized that the Lord would rebuke him. At times, the Lord would correct him. The Lord would discipline him. But he also recognized that God could have done it in such a harsh way that it might not have even benefited him. He would have felt no love from it, if that makes any sense. My wife, something that she prays right now as we pray over our kids is that she knows how much they love them. I don't pray that as much because I think my kids do know how much I love them. I reinforce it time and time and day in and day out. And I think my wife, she definitely loses her patience. She definitely gets angry with the girls. And these are conversations we've had, off to the side, not in front of the kids, of course. But yes, like she wants them to know how much she loves them. So she's trying to go about it in the proper way, in the proper light, in the proper handling. So anyways, yeah, we want our kids to have the fear of the Lord. We want them to have fear and reverence, of course, but we don't want it to be so heavy and so hard that they just lose their spirit. Their spirits are quenched. Their personalities aren't even themselves anymore. They don't know who they are. They don't have identity in who they are. And they just grew up like they just can't wait to leave your home. Like, that's terrible to me. I've said this to my wife. We've talked about this recently about when kids turn 18, it's just like this automatic Western culture. Kick them out. Let them learn on their own. Let them do their own thing. And I've never been that person. I love my girls so much. I don't want them leaving my home. I really don't. But I know they've got to go and spread their wings and do their things. I'm not trying to keep them in a bubble. I am the least bubble person on the planet. Believe me, I am. I am not a bubble person. And I'm not a hover parent either. But again, I just love my kids. I adore my kids. I want them to be around. But I want to create an environment like what I've told my wife is, yeah, she's like, no, they need to get going with their life. Okay, fine. So we don't really see eye to eye on that. But to her point, she's like, but yes, of course, I would want them to have an environment they feel safe to come back to, that they feel welcome to come to, that they're always welcome in our home, that they always can come back. So yeah, I'm not trying to kick my kids out right away. But at the same time, if they leave, I want them to not leave because they hated the environment, because they hated being around their parents. They couldn't stand being around us. Like that to me just sucks. And I've, with the limited opportunity I've had, when I used to do ministry, the amount of kids, teenagers, college-age kids, and I've heard those stories, and it just breaks my heart. I don't get that. I don't get that. I'm going to address this stuff here in a minute. And I don't get that stuff. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. So sorry. Let's keep moving. Okay. All right. That was already a lot. I don't even know how long I've been recording, but that was already a lot. So now before we get into some more of this practical application, I want to lead with this. And you really, really, really got to be thinking about this when it comes to the discipline and the practical application of proper and best ways of disciplining. You need to decide when you want to be friends with them. And what I mean by that is if you're going to be friends with them when they're a child, they will likely be a horrible adult. Sure, we've known people like this. it would be better for you to be friends with them when they are adults. After you've trained them that you're their authority, you're proactive, you're doing all of the things that you ought to be doing. But if you're going to be friends with them as a kid, just know that they're not going to respect you when you start to lay down discipline or rules or what have you. They're not going to see it as such, right? They're not going to see you as that adult figure, as that authority. Okay. So it's better to be friends with them after they have left their home or their familiarity. You are their authority. They need to see you as such. Our children need you to be parents, not their best friend. And that's hard. That's really hard. I'm not saying there's not a balance, or I'm not saying you can't do those things, but you have to decide when you want to do it, when they're younger or when they're older. I would rather be their friends when they're older. I'd rather them want to hang out with me and respect me and honor me and want to spend time with me when they're older. I don't want to lose them when they're, as they're young, because they're going to grow up to be spoiled and they're not going to appreciate that stuff. So we are to lead them and guide them in the ways of the Lord, which means sometimes you will cause them to feel pain and to hurt because you are teaching and training them properly. Make sense? So I'm not saying you can't be their friend. I know that sounds contradictory. All I'm saying is you've got to see yourself as the authority over these children. Yes, there are times, you can kind of have that friendship, if you will. And I would say, growing up, like for my brother and I, our dad was like probably our best friend, but there was definitely a fine line. There was definitely a balance between that. And there was time and place for those things. When we were hiking and stuff, yep, he was like our friend, right? When we were doing fun activities and stuff with him, he was definitely like one of the boys, one of the guys, right? Like I still remember even in high school, we would go and shoot a potato gun with him. And he would do crazy stuff with this potato gun and dare all the boys to do all these things. And yeah, he was one of the guys, right? He was one of those people. But we also knew that switch could flip at any moment if we did something wrong. And then it was, oh yeah, okay, yeah, he's totally in authority and we have to respect this guy, So I'm not saying there's not times you can't be their friends, of course, but you just have to know when it's appropriate. And I would always lean towards caution, and I would always lean towards, be the authority, because then they'll respect that and honor you. And then when they get older, now you guys can be best buds. Now you can be friends. You can go fishing. You can, as moms, you can go to the mall. Or do people still go to the mall? Whatever, things like that. Whatever. Go do your nails, your hair, whatever. And that sounds awesome, right? I think that's probably the way it ought to be. I think. Anyway, so moving on, let's go into the practical application. So I've already given you a lot of tips and tricks and things, and we've already kind of gone over some stuff, but that was actually a lot of the baseline things. Now let's get into more practical application. This section is all going to be my practical application. I've got it broken into like 2 different parts, maybe 3. Let me see here. 1, 2. I have it broken down into 3 parts. So stick with me. That was a lot to give you all the baseline and different things. And I'm sure there's stuff I missed. I'm sure there's things that are still I miss. And that's why I'm hoping I'll touch on a lot of this in the practical application. And some of it may overlap. So forgive me for that. I'm not trying to regurgitate things, but maybe it needs to be regurgitated, right? Okay. So the first part of the practical application I have is the unpleasant. We've already kind of touched on this with God correcting us, and it's an unpleasant thing and it doesn't feel good. Like we're like, that doesn't feel like love at all, right? So the very first thing I do, and I try to have verses for all of these, and some of them I don't have verses. I was like, oh, I forgot to put verses down for some of this stuff, and maybe they'll come to me, or maybe I'll find them in real time, but a lot of practical application. This is the good stuff, you guys. This is some of the good stuff, the hands-on, all right? The first thing I have, don't let them cry it out. This has to do with babies. Look, if you've done this, go repent. Tell your kids you're sorry. They might not remember or whatever, but tell God you're sorry. I am not a fan of this whatsoever. I really believe Western society has really botched a lot of these things. Like, there's a lot of good that have come out of Western societies for sure. But man, when it comes to family values and it comes to like affection and I don't know, just a lot of these things I'm going to talk about, I feel like we are lacking heavily and we have missed it. Why is the crying out? Like I remember when I first had Isabella, and both my wife at the time, we both agreed, no, she's gonna sleep with us. We're not gonna let her cry it out. And a lot of like psychiatrists and a lot of these people would say, no, your marriage is so important. You don't want to lose that bond. You don't want to this, that, and the other. I'm like, I agree with that. But just putting my kid in a dark room, even if there's a nightlight or whatever, and maybe some soothing music, but letting them cry to their heart. Do you know what kind of stress you are putting on your child at an early age? Like an infant? Like now there are tests and studies that are finally coming out confirming this stuff, that all these psychiatrists and all these people about raising kids, they were totally wrong about this. Completely wrong. God, one time when I meditated on this teaching for so many years. And one time the Lord showed this to me because I remember like this family that was doing it, and God just like, and the Holy Spirit gave me a word for them right then and there. And I don't remember this word now. I wish I did, but it was for that family right then. But I was like, I need to write this down so I can put it in my teaching. But it basically had to do with like, if you as an adult were in a cave and you heard strange sounds and strange noises, and even if it sounded like rain or soothing this, out of the other, whatever, but you were hungry and you were cold and you were thirsty, and all this time for 9 months you had no issues whatsoever, and then all of a sudden these parents, these people who have been taking care of you in some form or capacity, decide to abandon you and leave you to sort out your emotions. Put yourself in their shoes as an adult. Most adults cannot even handle going hungry for an hour. 15 minutes sometimes. And I've seen adults freak out when they're in situations and circumstances where they have no control. Imagine a newborn baby in that similar situation. I'm sorry. That's not okay. And I don't believe the Lord says it's okay, as I've got verses to back it up. I understand that humans were created different than animals, but I do find it interesting that a vast majority of animals, their young sleep with them, especially mammals. We are of the mammal family. Again, I'm not trying to say that we're animals. We're above animals, of course. But I do find that that is very telling and interesting, that God designed it for animals to sleep and stay with their young. And you can go, again, look all this up. Koalas, kangaroos, bears, I don't know, some birds. I'm sure there's lots of others. Kittens, cats, big cats, little cats, dogs, all of them. They all sleep with their young ones until they're of age, and then from there they kind of do their own thing. So just another thing to keep in mind. I don't think humans were designed to not have that intimacy, that physical touch, that nurturing, especially at such a critical, young, very dependent age. So just food for thought, something to think about. Look, practical application, you can have a bassinet that's next to you. You can certainly roll them over to the bassinet. And we did that. That's what we did with our kids. We had a bassinet, and then little by little, we would graduate them to their crib. And it was okay. Like both my wives were nursing their kids. So again, we already talked about nursing. So you should be nursing your kids. If you can do it, you should be doing it. I think that creates such a healthy bond. But yes, I mean, that's a practical application. Like, okay, they're in the bed, but maybe you don't want them totally in the middle or whatever. Like, fine. As they stop crying, go ahead and, bundle them up, put them in their little burrito, and put them next to you in the bassinet. They'll be all right. And when they start crying again in the middle of the night, okay, you got to feed them or bottle feed them or whatever. Okay, that's fine. Grab them, comfort them, and then put them back. They'll stop crying. It works. It really does work. And I do believe that's why all my kids have been very affectionate and very just close to us because of those reasons. I was very staunch on that stuff. And I think Raylyn, my current wife, I feel like we talked about this and she was like, no, I think crying it out is a good thing. And I'm like, that I put my foot down on that, and I don't really remember our conversations, but I think my wife could attest to that. Like I absolutely put my foot down on those things. And I was like, no, absolutely not. God has showed me otherwise, and I am not going to go against what He has taught me. I'm sorry, and I think it has absolutely benefited us. Now, have we lost sleep? Have we got bags under our eyes? Yeah. Is it worth it? I think so. I absolutely think it was. So here's the verses. First one I've got is going to be Genesis 21:16-18. For context, this has to do with Hagar and Ishmael. And Abraham sent them off. Actually, Sarah was upset by all of this. She finally had her kid or whatever, and Isaac. And now all of a sudden she wants nothing to do with this Hagar anymore and Ishmael. And she's like, nope, I got my own kid. Y'all can skedoodle. Y'all can get out of here. And God said to respect Sarah on this one. God told Abraham to go ahead and respect her. But here we are, Hagar and now Ishmael, her newborn baby, have departed. They've left. Not newborn. I don't know how old the kid was, but I guess the kid had weaned. Yeah, so they had weaned or whatnot. But so where am I at? I'm getting sidetracked. Verse 16-18. Then this is Hagar, then she went and sat down across from him at a distance of about a bow shot. Bows can shoot pretty far. For she said to herself, let me not see the death of my boy. Like she was so beside herself, she didn't know what to do. She had no help. And she was like, I've lost my husband. I've lost everything. I've literally lost everything. And I'm supposed to take care of a child with nothing? And so that's how she felt. She was very depressed, very discouraged. So she was just going to abandon her kid. This is crazy. But for she said to herself, let me not see the death of my boy. So she sat opposite of him and lifted her voice and wept. Verse 17. And God heard the voice of the lad, of the child. Then the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, what ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of your child where he is. See that God answered the crying voice of a child. Verse 18. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation. And that was just taking him, just like we would cradle a baby, to comfort them, to stop them from crying. That's it. That's the verse I got. I know you may say, that that's a stretch. It's super out of context. It's not really. No, there's heart behind this. What's the heart? What's the spirit behind this? There's something behind this. Here's the next verse I have. And this is Exodus chapter 2. This is Moses again. Verse 6. And when she opened it, this is the daughter of Pharaoh. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the child was crying. The baby wept. So she had what? Compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. So again, I don't think it's right whatsoever to abandon a child, leave them to cry just for your sanity, just for your pleasure, just for your whatever. I'm not okay. I'm just not okay with that. Take it for what it's worth. Again, what is the whole point of all this? We're trying to train our children in the way that it should go, so when they're old, they don't depart from it. This is affection. This is compassion. This is empathy. All of these things wrapped up together. That is what you're doing by holding, nurturing your child, not letting them cry it out, rocking them to sleep, letting them sleep only a couple hours, and then they cry again, and then we go through it again. I get it. I've done it. I've had 4 girls. I was a participant in all of my girls' early years of their lives. I would even sing this little song to my girls. I'd be crying. I'd be like, don't cry, dry your eyes. It's all right. It's okay. The Lord will be with you today. And I would sing like different variations of this little song as my girls were crying. So you do what you got to do. Could I nurse them? No. I could give them a bottle when we got to the bottle phases, but no, I couldn't nurse them, but I could rock them. And there were many times, and I'm sure both of my wives would attest to this, that, when they were crying and my wives just needed sleep and they just couldn't deal with it anymore, I would take the girls on a car ride. I would go with them and I'd put on the music and little, kids music, and we'd go for a car ride, and I was tired. It was 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. And sometimes I'd go park at a park and I would kind of fall asleep, and I'd had the windows cracked. I actually had a story one time here in Colorado Springs, a Garden of the Gods, and I took Everly. She was crying and she just couldn't sleep, and she just really, no matter what we did, she couldn't, and really was just like at her wit's end. And I was like, let me take her, let me go, I'll go take care of it. And I took her in the car seat, and a lot of times my kids would like fall asleep in the car seat, so that kind of worked. And yeah, I would take her, and I drove to the Garden of the Gods, but I was tired too. I was exhausted, from working, running a business and everything else, and then, working like all day long, and then coming home and helping the wife out. But yeah, and I took her to Garden of the Gods, and no joke, we parked in the parking lot, and the windows down, just cracked, and I just put my head on the steering wheel and I passed out. I just fell asleep. And thank God Everly had fallen asleep too. And so we're just sleeping, man. We're just sleeping it up. We're just enjoying nature. And sure enough, all of a sudden I get a tap on the window by like some police officers, firefighters, and they're tapping on my window because I'm like passed out. Now the car wasn't running or anything, so it's not like, yeah, we were out in the open, so it wasn't like we were in a parked garage or something breathing in CO2 or something like that. But yeah, they just tapped on the window and it woke me up and startled me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And they had me roll down the window and then question me, hey, what are you doing? What are you, blah, blah. And I was like, and I told them exactly what I just told you guys. I just shared the story. And they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Good dad. Good job, dad. And I just took off after that. I don't even remember what time it was. It was like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. by that point. And I just took off and drove back home, and Everly was still sleeping. So it worked out. But my point is like, no, I did everything in my nature to make sure that my kids knew how much I cared about them and loved them. And I wasn't interested in having them cry. Think about it. Like if you're crying, like, there's a reason for it. Why are you crying? You got poop on your butt? You need to be wiped? You got a dirty diaper? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? You want somebody just to hold you? Are you uncomfortable in your what do you call it? Your little burrito blanket? Like, there's a reason. Think about that. Like, that's just logical, right? Like, there's a reason that people cry. There's something is hurting them. Something is afflicting them. Something is harming them. And like, we just need to take care of it at that age. Like, anyways, all right, enough about that. That took a long time. Okay, here's the next one I have. Again, we're in the unpleasant part of the practical application, because that's an unpleasant thing to do. The more rules and the more laws, the less trust and less love. What do I mean by that? Let's just take like a marriage. Like you'll see this in marriage where somebody is very insecure or really controlling or whatnot. They will set all of these boundaries and all of these rules and all of these things in place. Now, there may be justification for it. I'm not saying that there's not. So that may be the case. But if you have to establish all of these things early on, that means on your side, there's probably not a love and there's probably not a lot of trust. And that's why you have to do that, right? And again, maybe that person is not respecting and loving you or whatnot, and maybe respecting your boundaries or whatever, and now you got to establish those rules, fine. But if you're doing that early on, that tells me there's a problem already from the get-go. With kids, it shouldn't be that case. They don't know any better yet. That's why we've got to establish the whole rule first and then the correction second. So what I mean by this is I'm going to give you the example of Exodus. I've debated many people about this part of Exodus, about the 10 Commandments, the law, when it was given, because I don't want to get into this theology. I really, really don't. Like, I've read the book of Romans, I've read the book of Hebrews, so I understand it. But at the time when the law was given, the Israelites' attitude, in my opinion, this is just an opinion, I can't prove this, I believe the timing and the reason why the Lord gave the law when he gave it was because of the attitude of the Israelites. Because before all of this, for 400, 1,500 years or whatever it was, I don't remember the math, there were no laws. So when people go to you about the New Testament, I said, I'm going to talk about this side note, and they say, we got to follow the law. The God established the law. We got to obey the law. You got to get back to the law. Once you get saved, you got to go to the law. No, you don't. All they have to do is reference Abraham. No law given whatsoever. The covenant was made between God and himself, and he walked the line and made the deal with himself, since he could swear by nobody greater, because he knew Abraham wasn't going to break it. Yet, Hardly, Abraham had like 2 or 3 rules. That was it. Get circumcised, walk in faith, and like to just live by faith. And there was like one other thing that I don't remember offhand. The point is, there were hardly any rules involved because God's love was so overwhelming for this covenant to take place. That's it. That's all there was. When you first get married, usually there's so much love and the honeymoon and all this, that, and the other that you like overlook so many things. There's no need for all these rules in love. And then the honeymoon phase passes and now you own a home or you guys have a car together or whatever. And now you got all these rules. Well, I don't like this and you need to do this. And what happened to the love? What happened to the trust? I'm telling you. But why do I say that? Because we don't want to overwhelm our kids early on. I know I was going to get to a verse here, but we don't want to overwhelm our kids early on in life with so many rules and so many stipulations and so many this and so many that. Man, just as it comes naturally, okay, this is now a rule because of this is a thing. Okay, great. Because you might not have to make it a rule because it's not a thing. That's the point. Like, yes, we have the 10 commandments, right? And these are the guidelines that we should live by. But there's actually 613 laws, okay? Go read the rest of the Torah. Go read the rest of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, and you'll see all these other laws that came into place. Get out of here with this craziness. Anyway, so yes, know that if you are establishing a ton of rules and laws, it's probably a you issue more than it's a child issue. Just know that they're reflecting off of you. Their genetics and their being and their personalities are probably reflecting off of you, and these are probably things that you didn't correct early on from having a child, which I probably haven't brought this up, but there are things that you should probably be correcting before you have kids. That's a topic for not even this teaching because then it comes off judgmental and condemning. I'm not trying to condemn you. But yes, there are things in your life that if you know, you probably shouldn't be having kids yet, not because it's not the right time or the economy or this, that, and the other. Like, I've seen plenty of parents who don't have any of those things and they wing it and they have great kids. But I'm talking about personality traits, things that you haven't dealt with before you have kids. Those things are definitely going to get passed to your kids. So you should be correcting yourself before you have these issues with your kids. But guess what? You know, when your parents, their grandparents are going to start laughing at you because they're going to be like, oh, yeah, you reap what you sow. Remember that? So anyway, so I try to get rid of the reaping and sowing stuff with my kids in their lives. I'm like, no, it ends with me. It stops with me. The things that I didn't appreciate about my parents or whatever that I thought that they were wrong, how they handled and corrected certain situations, it ends with me. Okay? You have that same power and ability as a parent. All right? Anyways, side note, I don't know why I shared that, but okay. Exodus 19:8. This is the example for this one. Then all the people answered. Oh, let me read verse 7. So Moses came and called for the elders of the people and laid before them all these words which the Lord commanded him. Verse 8. This is the attitude of the Israelites. Then all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. Well, that seems pretty bold and arrogant. And see, people read over this and they don't really catch what's going on right now. So Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord, and the Lord said to Moses, behold, I come to you in the thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. So Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. I'm not saying any of this is wrong because I'm not God. But what I am saying is this. As I've read this story many, many times, like I said, it's just my opinion. I'm not saying this is a thus saith the Lord. You know, I usually go off of revelation, and I'm not saying I have a revelation of it. It's just something that I've thought about. I think a lot about scriptures when I'm studying. I mean, I'm always looking at the who, how, when, what, where, why. I'm like a detective when I study scriptures, and I'm really trying to analyze, you know, all the attributes, all the angles, all the perspectives, and I like to hear other people's perspectives on it so I can kind of build my own interpretation, if that makes sense. But I also believe the Lord has called me to be a teacher, so that's why I think I'm good at that stuff, and I like to do it. Anyways, but my point is this. So here's the picture. I want to paint the picture for you and why I believe this. God, the Heavenly Father, just rescued his people who were crying out for 400 years about their oppression, about being slaves, about, they were supposed to be in the promised land. And I'm not trying to get into all the backstory of all this, why they ended up in Egypt or whatever, because I don't know that they were actually supposed to be there, but here we are. That's just my opinion. God's in control of that stuff, and he was guiding, directing, but he did give some instructions to Abraham and to Jacob, and they weren't exactly listening at times. So anyway, nevertheless, my point is, so now we got the Israelites, they're servants, they're slaves of Egypt, and they're crying out for their redemption, and they're trying to get set free, and God's not hearing them in 400 years, blah, blah, blah. And then finally Moses comes on the scene, okay? We know the story. Hopefully you know the story. If you don't, you should read it. And so Moses shows up, and then his whole thing happens in his life, and then God gets a hold of him, and he sends him back to Egypt, and he's like, all right, let my people go. That's the whole message. Let my people go. And then fast forward, and then God brings him to the Red Sea, and already the Israelites are like grumbling and complaining, and they're like, you brought us out to this desert just to kill us so the Egyptians can find us and slaughter us and everything else, and it already started early. They're already complaining. And God's just like, oh my gosh. He probably didn't say it like that because it's like taking the Lord's name in vain. Anyway, no. So then he parts the Red Sea. And then he has them walk on the Red Sea. And then he destroys the Egyptians and he crushes their army. And then they get out to the other side of the Red Sea. And now, like, it says in verse 9 or chapter 19, verse 1, in the third month, after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. So this is 3 months after all of this. He could have given him the law then. If God was so concerned about the law, why didn't he give it to Abraham? I already brought that up. If the law was so important to give, if he just truly just couldn't wait, why didn't he give it right after Genesis 3? Why not there and just be like, all right, let's establish all the rules? No, because his love. He was loving kindness and tender mercies. And you can kind of see where that went because of Nineveh, the flood, and a lot of these other things that had taken place, and a lot of these evil things. We look at Sodom and Gomorrah, a lot of these things that had taken place. And God was like just punishing and wiping and obliterating people off the face of the planet. But my point is why wasn't the law given then? And my theory, my opinion is that it happened here. God, so I was painting a picture and I got sidetracked, but so God just rescued his children. He took them from harm's way. He took them through the Red Sea. He did these amazing miracles in front of them. The 10 plagues to the Egyptians, the Red Sea crossing, crushing their foes, and then having them go back and get all the gold and silver, telling the women to take all the precious metals and the gold and silver and get what was not even rightfully theirs per se, but it belonged to them. God's like, no, you're going to get that too. And he took them out, and then he clothed them. It says that their sandals didn't wear out, their shoes didn't wear out, their clothing didn't wear out. Like, it also says in Psalms that there were no feeble among them. Like, God supernaturally even healed them as they were going out, right? All of these things took place. And now God is like at this mountain with Moses. And it seems like, the picture seems like he's wanting to go and gather them, right? We see this later on in the Bible where he's like, I want to gather you like a hen, like, like under, what is it, a brood or whatever he says? Like he wants to gather his brood. He wants to gather them under his wings. And that's what it seems like God is doing with his people, his children. And instead of them being like, thank you, Lord, yes, we would love to do whatever it is you asked us to do, their attitude comes off as arrogant and like, just, I don't know. That's just my opinion. I'm probably reading into this, but that's how I've the more I've studied this and read this, the more I see where it's like God really wanted to just gather them up and just show them and pour out his love. But instead they were like, nah, we're going to do 10 times. We're going to go over and above whatever you ask us to do. And that was their attitude. And then God went up and he's like, all right, fine. I'm just going to speak to Moses from now on. Like, I wanted to have fellowship with you guys. That's it. Moses is going to be my voice piece. And that's all there is to it. I'm going to now hit you guys with the law. Right? And we already see what happened. And it's such a night and day difference. On a side note, I'm preaching right now. But on a side note, because we can see that what happened at Mount Sinai, 3,000 people died when the law was given. I don't think that was God's heart whatsoever. I don't think that was his heart at all. But when the new covenant, when the new testament, Christianity started to take hold and the Holy Spirit fell in Acts chapter 2, 3,000 people got saved. That was God's heart. He just saved a multitude of people, the Israelites, from Egypt, from bondage and slavery and everything else. Millions and millions of people. And out of it, the law was given. And 3,000 people died. In the New Testament, thank God because of Jesus, the Spirit was given without measure, and 3,000 people got saved. One was on Mount Sinai, and one was on Mount Zion. So I don't know why I'm sharing that, but all that to say is, let me come back to my notes. I'm getting super sidetracked. The more rules, the less trust and love. And in the New Testament, it's remarkable because Jesus summed up the 10 Commandments with just 2 rules. And then you can even see further down, Paul sums up the 2 commandments with 1 commandment. And he really simplified all of this stuff. So just bear that in mind. Like, I think our goal is to get to the less rules and the less laws. As your kids get older, you don't want to have as many rules. I mean, the rules may change. Things may change in the teenage years and different things may come up. And that's all fine. And I'm not saying don't have any rules. I'm not saying that either. You're like, Philip, what are you saying? You're having a mixed match? I'm not. You got to feel it out. You got to feel it out. You got to really do that. And I try to have very little rules with my girls. I really do. But are there rules in place? You bet. There are things that I'm guiding and directing, and there are hard and fast rules for sure. And hopefully, eventually, as they learn those things, we can eliminate some of those things, right? But, well, it's not eliminate because, again, we don't eliminate the 10 Commandments, but Jesus summarized it and he summed it up, Anyways, okay. Already said this one. Here's the next one. Establish rules before correction. I already said this, already went into this. Let's go back to Genesis 2:17. I'm just going to read the verse so I can back it up with scripture. And this is the knowledge of the tree and evil. This is God talking about the tree. Verse 16, and the Lord commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. Verse 17, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. So he's letting them know the consequence ahead, but he's also giving them the rule. So it's important that once you establish the rules and the laws, establish the punishment as well. Let them know what it is, the correction that's going to take place. And that may change. That can be, you can change and tweak that, over time. And that's perfectly fair. And I think that's allowed. Okay. But again, I don't need to beat this one up. I already mentioned this one to you earlier. Establish rules first and foremost, right beforehand. Okay. The next one I have, your rules need to be enforceable. Once you start with rules and your correction and whatnot, make sure they're enforceable. What do I mean by that? I can't say to my child, if you don't do this thing, you're not going to your friend's house today for their birthday party. Now, you've already RSVP'd. You've already made the decision that they're going, and you've promised them all week that they're going. Unless they did something horrendous, I suppose, and they really can't go, or they get sick or whatever, and they really do something, then fine. I guess then that's the rule. But if you're just saying that to scare them as a fear tactic or something, are you going to follow up with that afterwards? If you don't, then don't say it. This will lead me into something later about lying. Like, you never lie to your kids. But you want to make sure that you can enforce it. So keep the enforcement very practical and very simple and very within reach for yourself, especially if you don't have like a way to correct them, like, and you only have your hands or something. Like, you just got to be careful about how you're enforcing your rules. And obviously sometimes those enforcements may change depending on your location or what you're doing. If I'm at the grocery store compared to my house, I will likely enforce them with a wooden spoon at my house, whereas at the grocery store, there may be something else I may do with them. And, deal with it at that time. I may take away their snack or their treat that I normally buy them at the grocery store if they're acting up. You are not going to get a treat now. But again, if I say it, I need to enforce it. And I better not lie about what it is that I would do. Don't make stuff up just to put fear in them. That doesn't work. God always stood behind the things that he said he would do. If he said, I'm going to do this bad thing, he did it. Unless they repented or something. If he said, I'm going to do this good thing, he did it. It was all conditional, but he kept to his word and he did not deviate from that. Remember, there is no lies inside of God. There's none of that stuff. So, all right. So hopefully that one makes sense. Let's move on. This is one command, one time. I can't stress this one enough. And I see this all the time with parents. And somewhere along the lines, my guess would be because of the New Testament, they're like, God gives grace and God gives second chances and God this and God that. Yes, it's true. And there are times where we'll apply grace. We're going to get to it. Remember that we're in the unpleasant section right now. But what I mean by that is if you want good, true obedience, don't give them the opportunity to disobey. What do I mean by that? So if I say something one time and I have to say it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, I have given them the opportunity to disobey. And usually by the 3rd or 5th time, I'm now frustrated and angry and I am raising my voice and I am telling them it's now or it's whooping. No, it's a one and it's a done. The correction comes immediately after the one. You want to train them to be able to quickly listen, to quickly be obedient. My girls know when I call their name, yes, Dad. Like I don't expect them to come right away unless I gave them that command. But if I'm like, girls, where are you at? They're like, yes, Dad, we're downstairs. Okay. And then I might say, all right, 5 minutes. I need you girls to come upstairs. We're going to have dinner or whatever, right? And now the command was given. Now they know this, right? But if I have to call them 3 or 4 times, they know I am downstairs with the wooden spoon and the little butts are getting spanked because they know one time. That's it. First time. No chance after that. Now here's the verse I've got with this one. All right. Numbers 20. And this has to do with getting water out of the rock. This is verse 7. We'll read this passage. Then the Lord spoke to Moses saying, take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. One instruction, one time. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. This is verse 10. And he said to them, hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Verse 11. Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Did you catch that? God said in verse 8, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield water. He didn't say anything about striking the rock, to my knowledge. This is sad. This is sad. I don't like this. I don't like how God handled this. But I'm not God. Verse 12. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me, to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. This was the water of Meribah, because the children of Israel contended with the Lord, and he was hallowed among them. So this is where God punishes Moses for not obeying that simple one command. He didn't tell him twice. He only told him once. And that was it. And that was enough. Moses should have known by this time, with everything that Moses had done, especially with that rod, parting the Red Sea and everything else that he did, the serpent and everything else, he should know, like, just do what God asks you to do. One time, that's it. That's it. And then God slapped him with a punishment and said, that's it. You're not going into the promised land. So, I don't know. That's super sad. But all that to say, there's a lot of other verses in the Bible, but I just want to bring that one up because this is a really harsh punishment and it sticks out to me. And we've talked a lot about Moses already. I really see Moses and God as like a father and son relationship. I haven't said this at all yet, but that's how I see the relationship. And then Moses is like seeing this kind of similar relationship with the children of Israel. And he's like, these are my kids. I don't want to be dealing with them, And so I kind of see this leadership kind of passing down that way. But anyways, Nevertheless, that's what happened. One time, one command, and then the punishment, because you want your kids to be obedient. It's so important. Like even in the or in the Old Testament, where it says obedience is better than sacrifice. We want our kids to be obedient, and there's a time and place. Like what if? I know there's all this whataboutism and what ifs, right? Like what if the house is on fire and your kids are just so keen to not listening to you, and it has to take 3, 4, 5 times to get their attention or to listen or be obedient or whatever, and the house is on fire and you're like, kids, get out of the house right now, we gotta go. And they're just like, okay, I'm gonna play for a little bit longer. No, right now. Like if they haven't been trained to listen to you, what do you expect? Like it's important that your kids learn this stuff. So anyways, so let's go on to the next one, okay? Like I said, there's a lot of other verses I could find, but that was the one I wanted to dig up. This one is a big one. I've already kind of touched on this, but this is a big one. And this is no counting, no countdowns. Oh man, God showed me this one before I ever had kids. And I was just like, holy cow. And it's funny because all this stuff that I'm sharing, God has showed me these things along the span of my life, my childhood, my teenage years, and even as an adult. And he showed me all these different examples, and he would speak these things to me. He would say these things to me. And I'd be like, okay, that's weird. All right, what about it? And then he'd give me the verse to go with it. And then I'd start paying attention after he showed me. He's like, all right, now pay attention. I was like, oh my gosh, you are so right. You are so right about these things, Lord. I see it now. I see it. But I would have never learned this stuff if God had not showed me these things, right? Anyway, so no counting, no countdowns. This is going to be a stickler for a lot of people. But you know what? It works. And it's true. And here's the verse to back it up. Proverbs 13:24. He who spares his rod hates his son. We're going to talk about this verse more later. But I'm focusing on the second part. But he who loves him disciplines him promptly. Some interpretations say early, some say immediately. Why is that important? This goes back to the one command. And I'm trying to do these kind of in order. They're not really in order, so whatever, but bear with me. But this goes back to the one command. Because if they don't listen the first time, is there a correction? Is there discipline? Is there some type of action that takes place? If there's not, just like training, I'm going to use a dog again, just like training of a dog with like a kibble or a treat or whatever, like they learn over time, they get this reward if this thing happens. This is unfavorable. This is the negative reward. They know that the reward is a correction, a spanking or timeout or whatever it may be if they don't listen the first time, if they don't be obedient the first time. And why do you do it immediately? Here's why. So I will hear parents count to 3 and a half and 3/4 and 5 and 6, and they just go on. And the kid knows they have built a tolerance to know that nothing is going to happen when they hit this so-called magic number that all of a sudden the kids are expected to respond by 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever god-awful number you put in place. It doesn't make any sense. And you know what happens in between 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 to whatever numbers you've got in place? They can act and be any sort of way all during that time because they know, well, I can just not respect or listen. I've got 2 to 3 seconds to do that. I've got 5 seconds to not listen. And then on second 5, I got to listen because then I'll get spanked. You have just given them the ability to do whatever the hell they want for that time frame. But as long as they hit the 5, 10, 20 second marker, they're good. There's no disciplinary action that takes place in between that time frame. And I have witnessed this hundreds and hundreds of times. I don't say anything. It's not my place to say something. But wow, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. You need to correct it and nip it immediately. He who loves them disciplines them promptly, immediately. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, is there a place for having time and numbers? Absolutely there is. If you want them to do something in a certain amount of time because you want them to be quick or readily or respond or what have you, That makes sense. Let's put that into practical application. What do I mean by that? Okay, girls, I need you right now in the kitchen. They know I don't count. They know if they don't start moving and I hear, okay, dad, or some kind of response to my command, they know there is a punishment or something that's coming pretty quickly. I don't count. They know their dad doesn't count. Now, after that, and I hear them start moving, or I hear them say, okay, dad, we're coming, or whatever. Okay, thank you for responding. By the way, always, we're going to get to this. This is the favorable. Always respond with positivity. When they are doing what you ask them to do, this is how you reinforce your rules so that you get them to do what you want them to do. Positive reinforcement. It works. I am positive reinforcing every step of the way. Every little command I give them. We're going to get to this. I know I'm getting ahead. Every little step of the way, I am saying, thank you for answering. Thank you for coming. Thank you for moving. Thank you for getting off of the couch. Thank you for responding. I want them to be positive reinforced. Most parents wait until it's all said and done, and then maybe they're lucky enough to get some kind of positive reinforcement. But they are sure to correct them all sorts of which way and backwards if they don't do one little thing correct. That's heavy-handed. Don't be that person. Be the person that's heavy, graceful, heavy with the grace and extending love and mercy and kindness, okay? You want them to get, anyways, all right. But okay, so now they've responded, and now I might say, okay, 5 seconds, I need you to come upstairs, all right? Stop screwing around, stop doing whatever you're doing, turn off the TV, whatever it is. I'm giving you 5 seconds, and I need you guys upstairs, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Phil, that was really fast. Whatever. You get the point. I'm just trying to get through this. Fine. That's a reasonable thing to do. But if you started with the 5 seconds to respond, or the 5 seconds to initiate, or the 5 seconds to do something, no, I've already given you the example. You've given them 4 seconds to be disobedient. And that is not okay. We saw just now with Moses that God gave him one command. And I don't even know what took place in between. I should probably go back and study that. I'm not even sure what took place in between that. I don't know why Moses struck the rock. Maybe there's something I'm missing. He was just supposed to speak to it. So I don't know what was going on, but he clearly didn't wait, or he clearly wasn't patient, or he clearly didn't do the right thing. And then he's just like hitting the rock, and God wasn't having it. So anyway, all right. So hopefully that makes sense. We got to discipline them promptly and correctly and early, and getting them to do it immediately. We don't, like if they're in the front yard, hey, come inside. It's time to come inside and have dinner. They're like, no, we just want 5 more minutes. I've seen this at the playground so many times. Oh, 5 more minutes. You know what you're doing? You're undermining yourself. When you've issued a command or a phrase or statement or what have you, and they know they've got a time frame to be disobedient or rebellious, why would you expect them to honor your word anymore? Why would you expect them to fear you anymore? Why would you expect any authority from you anymore whatsoever? Your words have no meaning to them. They have no bearing whatsoever. The kids know, and they will push your limits, and they will push you, and they will test your boundaries. They will test these things. Believe me, they're smart. They're smart little kids. They are smart. Give them credit. They'll do it. They know. From experience, past experience, you called them to come inside. They don't have to listen. It doesn't mean a whole lot anymore. Your words don't have power. And again, I've seen this a lot with women. That's why they lose their patience so much, and they get so frustrated and they lose control because there's no authority behind it, because their words have lost value. They don't stand behind their own words. They give them 100 chances to do the right thing instead of one and done, and one chance and one response. And that's it. That's all that needs to take place. And now your words have value. And now when you're speaking good things and positive things to them, they're going to honor it. They're going to believe it. You're going to say something good. Hey, kids, if you do this thing, it's going to be a really good thing for you. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. That's good to know. Why? Because your words have value now. So that's the other part of that equation of why your words are holding no value, because you don't stand behind what you actually say. Right? And then once you finally do, you get so angry or frustrated by it. There's no love in it. All right, moving on. Don't hate me. Don't kill the messenger. I'm telling you, You want success. I'm trying to give you rules for success, okay? I'm trying to help you out here. These are things that God has showed me and imparted to me. That's the only reason I'm sharing them. This isn't, thus saith Philip. These are things that God has seriously downloaded to me over many, many years. All right, moving on. Simple commands, very few words. I was going to look verses up for this, and I forgot to. And I'll just go off of the cuff, so you can look these up on your own, but I'll go off the cuff. What do I mean by this? And I've already kind of alluded to some of this stuff. I've re-emphasized this with my wife, and I'm like, stop giving them these long, drawn-out commands. Like, they've forgotten half of whatever you said halfway through. Like, I'm listening to it. I'm like, I already forgot half of the stuff you told me. I'm like, adults have a hard time multi-managing or multitasking and multi-managing and prioritizing. Like, forget it. Like, keep it simple, man. Keep it simple. And you can see this all. So, like I said, I'm just going to throw out things that are all in my head. All throughout Scripture. In the Old Testament, God uses very simple commands for his people. You know, thou shalt have no other gods before me. That's pretty simple. Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. That's pretty simple. One line, one word, one phrase. Who are you? I am. All right. Is there more to that? No. I am. I am that I am. There, I doubled it. Gave you 2 for your money. No, but seriously, like, this is how it is. And even in the New Testament, you'll see Jesus telling his disciples. I've studied this. It's funny as this teaching is in my brain all the time. And anytime I read scripture, I always see this stuff. I always see this stuff playing out. And even Jesus with his disciples, he's like, go to the other side. Simple command. Very simple command. Pass out the 12 baskets. Heal the sick. Cast out demons. Like, we complicate a lot of these things that God tells us to do. And even in my own life, and I'm sure if you've ever heard the voice of the Lord, if you ever recognized it, him speaking to you, it's always very simple commands. It's never these long, drawn out things. And that's why, on a side note, it impresses me how the Bible was written, because these are long, drawn out thoughts and commands. So I don't know, it must have come over time, but man, talk about playing telephone and somehow getting it right. I don't know. But the practical application is that simple commands. And again, so what do I mean by that? Let's give you an example. Again, with my girls. Hey, come upstairs. Now. All right? They start doing that thing. Thank you for listening. All right? I need you girls to get your shoes off. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Go wash your face. Go wash your mouth. Go get ready for dinner. Perfect. Thank you. Nice job listening. Okay, let's go sit at the table. Now, people would say, well, oh my gosh, Philip, that's so like micromanaging. Yeah, they're freaking kids. They're children. Have you seen them? I always say this all the time, and it's a joke, but it's so true. Have you ever tried to like wrangle up your kids, all your kids, especially when they're with their friends and stuff, and you're trying to get them all to listen or be obedient and like listen and stuff, and get them like quieted down? It's like herding cats. Have you ever tried to herd cats? It's really challenging, especially if you don't have a lot of these practices in place. It's going to be even more challenging. So that's why I'm trying to simplify the process. Yes, am I micromanaging? Sure, because they're kids and I need them just to stay focused, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. I mean, the verses that come to mind, it's like the word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. Like, God doesn't give us the full-blown picture all the time. A lot of times he's like, here's the step by step instruction. And you can see this time and time again in scripture, okay? So anyways, but having said all that, yes, simple instructions. Is it micromanaging? Is it more for you to do? Yes, but as they grow and mature, you can give them more instructions. And we've gotten to that point now. In the car, when we get home from school, there's like 3 or 4 things the girls need to do. I still reemphasize because they still get distracted. They still get sidetracked. I'm not looking for opportunities just to spank them to see what they're going to do. We're going to touch on that. Don't do that. Don't make opportunities just to spank them. That's terrible parenting. That's terrible. Don't do that. But no, I want to reemphasize. Okay, girls, we're a couple minutes from home. What do you need to do when we get home? And eventually that's going to go away because they just know it. Hopefully. No, they're just going to know it. Just like training somebody for a job or whatever. You don't have to keep micromanaging them over time. But in the beginning, you do. You'll micromanage them a little bit in the beginning. And then those rules will start to disperse or come off. And you don't need as many rules. You don't need to micromanage them. They know their job. But yeah, girls, so we come home. Okay, what do you need to do? 3 things. Get your water bottles. Get your homework out if you need to take your homework out. Pick up any trash. And get that all right. That's the three things. Pick up your homework, get your, clean up. Basically clean up. Get your homework out if you need it. And get your water bottles. Right? Get inside. And then, okay, then now that's them. Now they got three other things when they get inside. Okay, get your shoes off. Go to the bathroom. And head upstairs. And those are the next three things. So now I'm giving them to them in little batches. But I'm still keeping the commands very simple. Try it. Try it, try it, try it. You're going to have to fight hard on it because, yes, I've heard parents and they give them these long, drawn-out commands. And then halfway through, their kids are ADD and they don't know what they're doing and they forget. Now they're getting their butts whipped because they didn't fulfill every little command to the law and to the T. But nowhere along the lines were they getting any praise or respect or honor for doing the one or two commands along the way. So that's another benefit of that, is that you get more opportunities to praise them. Yes, you're micromanaging them, but you get more opportunities to praise them, and they're hearing that more than the bad things that they're not doing. All right? All right, simple commands. Let's move on. Here's another big one. All these are big. I don't know. Respond versus react. Responding versus reacting. What do I mean by this? This is everything in life, but we're talking about kids. You can respond to a child, or you can react to what's happening. Your goal is to respond. When you respond, that means you generally are in control of your emotions, right? When you react, you react in a way that's unfavorable, and you usually regret it. You'll say things maybe you don't want to say. You'll maybe be harsher in your discipline, whatever it may be. I always do my best to respond. Are there times I react? You bet, because I'm still a human. I'm still a dad. I'm still a parent, and there's still things that frustrate me, and I react. And I still, to this day, there are things with my older daughter who passed away that I regret, And it hits harder after losing a kid, of course. But no. But even as your parent, or even as your children grow up, and they, I don't know, and they rebel, they go this way or that way. And this is why we're doing all this. So your kids don't rebel. So they want to hang around you. So they continue their relationship with their Lord. So they go into their calling and their purpose and whatever that may be. But again, if you're constantly reacting, you're putting your kids in fight or flight mode. And you don't want that. You don't want that. And my kids even now know that I've told them, because I catch myself if I'm constantly correcting them, which I don't want to be doing, and I'm usually good about that, but there are times, and I've caught myself, and I'll say, you know what, kids, listen, I want you girls to tell me the truth, because a lot of times I will ask them things. They know they did it wrong, and then I'm going to correct them. Well, that's going to promote lying. I don't want them lying to me. I want them to be honest. So what have I done? And I'm on a side note right now, but I want them to be honest with me. And I told them many times, and I will keep reinforcing this. Girls, please be honest with me. You're still going to get punished because we have established this rule, but it will be less severe. If you are honest with me, I will always make the punishment less severe. And sometimes I'll overlook it if it's really mundane. But if they are lying to me, then the punishment is going to be more severe. So I'm trying to teach them that I want them to always come to me with the truth, always tell the truth to me. But yes, I still have rules, and we still have to stick to those things because my words mean something, Anyways, I don't know why I was sharing that. I'm sure it's probably in my notes later. But that's like a responding versus reacting. Let's give an example. Let's say I'm downstairs and they know they're not supposed to eat downstairs. And I see them downstairs with chocolate or messy things, and they've got yogurt all over the couch, and they spilled their juice on the floor and everything. I could react and immediately get over there and grab them and whoop some behinds and just yell at them. That would be reacting. It may be justified. I don't know. Or I could respond. Girls, because they can't lie in this situation. I see it. It's right in front of me. Girls, you know the rules. No food downstairs. If you have drinks downstairs, make sure there's a lid on it. You girls have been disobedient. That is not okay. The TV will now go off immediately, and you girls will go find something else to do. You will get a spanking, and that will be that. And that is literally it. And that's what happens. But I could have reacted. I could have been harsh. I've seen parents throw the TV to the ground, take the remote, throw it against the wall, take the juice, throw it in their faces. Like, I've seen some crazy things with parents do some crazy stuff, and they think it's helping. You are reactive. You need to be responsive. So you discipline in love, and you follow your own guidelines. Okay? So let me give you some verses with this. Exodus 32. Oh, this is a big one. This is a long story. I'm going to try to just sum it up because this is a big, long story. All right, so this is the golden calf story. All right, if you don't know the story, go read it. Okay, so let's fast forward to, I don't want to read the whole thing. Verse 7? And the Lord said to Moses, go get down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. Quickly! Just a minute ago, they're like, we can do everything you said and then some. Yeah, right. Anyways, they have made themselves a molded calf and worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, this is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. Imagine how heated God would be. If I was God, I would have probably reacted this way too. I'd have been pissed. I'd have been super pissed. Verse 9, and the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and indeed, it is a stiff-necked people. There's a lot of exclamation points, a lot of angry marks here. Now, therefore, leave me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, and I will make you a great nation. Would you say God is responding or reacting? He is absolutely reacting in this situation, and here's how I will prove it. Verse 11. Then Moses pleaded with the Lord his God and said, Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out the land of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? He's putting the question back on God. He's trying to challenge his intellect a little bit. Verse 12, why should the Egyptians, this is critical, why should the Egyptians speak and say, he brought them out to harm them, kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? He's playing the devil's advocate here. Imagine having that kind of relationship with God. Total side note. What? Questioning God like that? Are you serious? They had a pretty healthy relationship. Anyways, still verse 12. Turn from your fierce wrath and relent or repent from this harm to your people. Verse 13, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by yourself and said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. So the Lord repented. Oh my gosh, I'm going to break some of your theology. I love this passage of scripture for the sole reason alone. But we're talking about raising kids. We're talking about responding versus reacting. So let's not get into the Lord repenting. So the Lord repented from the harm which he said he would do to his people. This was God reactive instead of responding to the situation. And if you didn't hear some of the key things in this, I want to bring this up. Verse 13, you swore his words by your own self and said to them, right? So his words. If God would have reacted in this way and had his way at that moment, and Moses had not interceded or intervened and caused God to change his mind, God would have broken his words. And that's why this is so significant about simple commands, no counting, no just one command. Your words need to have value. And that's kind of summarizing a lot of this. And we still got more to go through, but that's summarizing a lot of this. You want your words to have an impact. You want your words to have value. And if you don't value your own commands and your own words and your own things, and then implement some kind of discipline or whatever, stand by what you said, your words are going to have no meaning whatsoever. So keep that in mind. This is why it's so significant for you, let alone your kids. Anyways, so there's that example. So you can see God reacted and he had to be corrected. Crazy. All right, Numbers 11. Here's another example. And I don't need to keep beating this up, but I do like these verses. Numbers 11. Here we are again. We're just having the same heyday. We're having the same problems. You Israelites, the same old issues. Oh, should I paraphrase it? The people complaining and yeah, let's just go with verse 1. Forget it. Let's just go with it. Now when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, for the Lord heard it, and his anger was aroused. So the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some in the outskirts of the camp. Why the outskirts? How come they had to deal with that? Sucks. So if you're like the poor person and you were on the outskirts and you didn't be the lucky ones who got to be closer to the tabernacle or whatever, the temple or whatever, you got burned alive? Oh, God, I'm not saying it's not right, but that ain't right. Anyway, all right. His anger was aroused, so the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed in the outskirts of the camp. Verse 2, then the people cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. So he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord had burned among them. All right, so all that to say is, by Moses' intercession, God's fire and wrath was consumed. So we can see, again, God reacted. He was probably justified. For whatever reason, they're complaining. He was literally complaining. On a side note, complaining is a huge thing. If we haven't already addressed this, you should not allow your kids to complain. Man, that is a bad, bad thing, as you can see in the book of Exodus. Anyways, or in the book of Numbers, or whatever, like the Israelites in the desert. Anyways, so yeah, this was a big deal. And then we can go on to see where, this is where Moses is upset in verse 11. So Moses said to the Lord, why have you afflicted your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight that you have laid this burden of these people on me? And I think I've already read this earlier. Did I conceive all these people? No. Did I beget them that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a guardian carries a nursing child, the land which you swore to your fathers? Where am I going to get this meat? Where am I going to get all this stuff? So yeah, anyways, so whatever. The point is God reacted many, many times to the Israelites. Every time he would respond, but most of the time he was reactive to the Israelites. It seemed like he changed his tune, I would say, after the whole generation kind of died out. And then you get to Joshua, and then Joshua takes over, and it seems like God kind of has a change of demeanor with his people. So just my opinion. Anyways. And then one more example I was going to give is Jonah 3:10. Oh, actually, let's just go to the whole chapter of Jonah 3 real quick, because I'll read it in context. So this is where Jonah was not wanting to repent or go with the message of the Lord to get the people of Nineveh to repent, because he wanted them to die. He wanted them to be obliterated. He's like, screw these people. They don't deserve it. Verse 3. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh. This is chapter 3, verse 3. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey in extent. Verse 4. And Jonah began to enter the city on the first day's walk. Then he cried out, saying, yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. So that was the word that God gave him to share. So again, God's word, it means something. This is the punishment. But it says, so verse 5, so the people of Nineveh believed God. They took him at his word, proclaimed a fast, and put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least of them. Then word came to the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne and laid aside his robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he caused it to be proclaimed and published throughout Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles, saying, let neither man nor beast nor herd nor flock taste anything, nor let them eat nor drink of any water. But let man and beast be covered with sackcloth and cry mightily to God. Yes, let every one turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Who can tell if God will turn and relent or repent and turn away from his fierce anger so that we may not perish? So they weren't sure, but God is a man of his word. Then God, verse 10, then God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God repented from the disaster that he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. This is an example of God responding versus reacting. He gave them an opportunity to repent. He gave them an opportunity to change their ways. He gave them 40 days. But I could guarantee after that 40 days, God would have upheld his word and he would have obliterated Nineveh. So there you go. So there's 2-3 examples of reactive versus responding, and we can learn from our Heavenly Father. Don't get angry. Don't react. Respond. Give grace. Give as much grace as possible. All right. All right, so the next one, under the unpleasant practical application, is use an inanimate object to correct, not your hands. What do I mean by that? Your hands, and I'm not saying I don't do this, and I have to watch myself. Many times I don't have an inanimate object, but it says in Proverbs 23:13, let's go to it. Do not withhold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod, he will not die. You shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. Now that sounds incredibly mean, of course. But the one thing that I want to point out is the rod of correction, the rod. It doesn't say your hand. Why is that significant? Because your hand is for affection, kindness, tenderness, love. You touch their face with your hand. But if you just spank them with your hand and then you go to touch them and reach for them with your hand to hold their hand or to kiss on them or whatever, they're going to pull away. They're going to associate your hand as a disciplinary thing. Whereas a rod is an inanimate object. There's nothing tied to it. It's just an object. So what? If it's a switch, a reed, a belt, a shoe, a flip-flop, whatever, So that's very, very important that you're doing that. And again, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I have certainly spanked my kids many times with my hands. So I'm always very careful about that. And I'm always trying to reassure them, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't have an object handy. Apologize for hitting you with my hand, but you needed to be corrected. So anyways, so there's that one right there. Always try to have an inanimate object. When I was growing up, we had a paddle. And we knew what the paddle was for. It was in a designated area. So we just knew when we were getting spanked, we had the paddle. Many of you probably had a belt. Many of you had a paddle. Many of you had to go get a switch or something. I don't know. But so everybody knew that. So somehow or another, this has been lost in translation. And yes, there are parents who are heavy-handed. And they just, any chance they get, they just hit them with their hands all the time. They backhand them. They slap them across the face. I don't think you should ever, by the way, I don't think you should ever slap your kid in the face, no matter how bad it is. No matter how bad it is. That's just my opinion. I just think that's incredibly mean and incredibly harsh. You should never close fist ever hit your child. I don't care if it's a male, a man and a man, a father and a son. No, it shouldn't happen. It's not the way that it's meant to be. That's heavy-handedness. That's anger. That's wrath. That's punishment for just whatever. I don't know. And again, I know parents that think that way and they think that it's okay to do that. And I'm telling you right now, that is not the love of God. That is not the love of Jesus Christ. That is not how he would have handled that situation. Okay? We are not in the Old Testament anymore. We don't live by those ways. We don't live out of that anger and that frustration. We don't respond or react, I should say, the way that God did in some of those situations. He was very heavy-handed at times. Anyway, so yes, all I'm saying is try to avoid using your hands at all costs. Do your best, even if it's a rolled up newspaper or whatever, just a ruler or something. Try to use an inanimate object, So your hands should be for helping. Your hands should be for love. Your hands should be for compassion. Okay? Next one. Don't discipline in anger. Now, this is a tough one. And I've already addressed this. I keep addressing this one about reacting and using your fists or your hands or, if father's getting angry or what have you. It is tough to not do it in anger. So you have to make sure you are in control of your emotions, even if things get to the point where they shouldn't get. And as I already said, I have a vision right now in my mind of one time that I did all of these things that I am telling you not to do, so learn from my mistake. I shouldn't even say this. But yes, my older daughter, who had special needs, who was very minimal verbal, And she was screaming at me and just would not stop. And I couldn't get her to stop, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And that was so frustrating. We were going to a restaurant, and I lost my patience with her, and I smacked her in the face. Probably the only time I've ever smacked my daughter in the face. And that's why I regret it so much. And she stopped. But even to this day, I'm like, maybe she had a headache. Maybe her stomach was hurting. Maybe she was frustrated. Maybe something was hurting on her. I don't know because of her lack of communication. All I know is I was losing my patience. I was giving her plenty of opportunities to stop, and I was trying to be as mindful as possible because in that situation, that was incredibly tough. Not knowing the heart behind it, the spirit behind it, or whatever it may be. But I lost my patience. I reacted instead of responded. I slapped her in the face just to get her to stop. And then she started crying. Like before she was like screaming and whatnot, and then she started crying. And I realized what I had done. We got into the restaurant and I apologized profusely to her. I said, baby, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know why you were screaming. I don't know what your problem was. I don't know what was going on. I'm sorry for the way I corrected you. And I'm saying that because you will regret disciplining in anger. If you're constantly disciplining out of anger, you have anger problems. And you need to get that resolved. Anger problems are going to lead to far worse problems down the road. You can discipline and you can be accurate and you can be correct and you can be justified. But if you're doing it out of anger, this will lead to problems, especially in the teenage years. And your kid may be not even wanting to associate or be with you after they've left their home. That would break my heart. That would absolutely break my heart. So I'm just saying that. And this generally goes more towards men, for sure. So let's read it. And here's the two verses. Ephesians 6:4. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. So yes, it's so important. It's saying right here that as a father, I have the ability to provoke my children to wrath, which, if I read this oppositely, would take them down of training, would not train them properly, and they would hate the Lord instead of admonition. I don't want that for them. I want them to love the Lord. I want them to be trained properly. I want them to respect and be reverent towards the Lord. So keep that in mind. And then the next verse that basically says the same thing is Colossians 3:21. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. And I already touched on this about breaking their spirits. You want to break their will without breaking their spirits. You don't want them to be discouraged. You don't want them to feel like they're a failure. You don't want them to feel like they cannot, meet your standards or what have you. You don't want that. They're just going to not try anymore. They're just going to give up. Anyway, so there you go. So, that one's an obvious one. Just don't discipline out of anger. Do your very best to respond and not react. Do your very best to use an inanimate object, not your hand. And do your very best to always not do it out of anger. But that leads me into this, because this is still kind of unpleasant. We're still in the unpleasant part. After discipline, show overwhelming love and affection. What do I mean by that? You're like, wait, what? That's like a super mixed message. That doesn't make any sense. I'll tell you, this is how my dad did it with us. And it clearly worked. I think it worked well, really well, because I do it with my children today. And that is this. After I've corrected my child, after the tears and after the heartache and after this and that, I'll give them a moment, a few minutes, some time, whatever it may be. Because as a child, they're still probably a little confused or like whatever. And if you haven't been doing all these things, and again, many times we just react or whatever, and kids are just super confused by what's going on or why are they getting corrected, and we're telling them and we're yelling at them or whatever it may be. But positive reinforcement goes so much further especially if combined correctly with correction. So after my kids have had their moment, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes or whatever it may be, I will go back to where they are, usually in their room or something, and then I will smother them, and I will hold them, and I will embrace them, and I will kiss them, even if they're mad at me. And if they tell me, Daddy, I hate you, or Daddy, you're mean, Daddy, whatever. Don't let those things affect you. If you allow your kid to manipulate you and affect you in that kind of way, you're going to have a hard time. You are the authority. You are in charge. You need to stand your ground. Stand by your words. It's very important. You are building character and integrity, not only in yourself, but in your children. And it's very important that you do that. But I will smother them and just wrap them up and kiss on them and play with them and tickle them. Because there's two things that are happening in that moment. One, I'm telling them, I know you're upset with me, but I have to discipline you because I love you. And after the discipline is done, I'm going to show you how much I love you and care about you. And I'll say statements like, I don't want you to end up in prison. I don't want you to end up getting arrested. I don't want you to end up making very bad decisions with your life or whatever, And I'll kind of use those phrases. But yes, and I'll try to get them back to recognize that it was just for a moment. I'm not still mad at them. I'm not still angry at them. Once the punishment is done, it's done. And my dad, again, was really good about this. He would never bring it back up or anything. Like, he would correct us sometimes really harsh. And then like half hour later, we were like terrified to go see where he was at. And he's like laying on the couch and watching a show or doing whatever he's doing. And we're like freaked out to even walk by him. And then we're like, Dad, we're so sorry. And he's like, for what? I'm like that thing 30 minutes ago or whatever, because we did. And he's like, I corrected you guys. You guys are good. Like, that's it. It's done, And for me, that verses that come to mind is like, blessed is the man whose sins are forgiven, whose transgressions are remembered no more. I think that's awesome. As far as the east is from the west, so far have you removed our transgressions from us. Like, God completely forgets about them. It's a powerful thing. So for me, I just want to do it and be done with it. I don't want to keep bringing it back up and be like, well, 30 minutes ago, you did that thing and I'm still going to be angry. Like, you're immature. As a parent, that's some super immaturity and that's some super manipulation. Like, stop doing those things. You don't need to bring it back up. Once you have made the correction and done the thing, it's done. Let's be done with it. If it reoccurs again, then we'll address it again. But we don't need to keep bringing it back up. Instead, I'd much rather just hug on them, love on them, give them overwhelming affection, and let them know I'm doing this because I love you. It may not seem like it right now, but I assure you one day you will appreciate it. And that's the truth. That's the truth. What verses do I have to go with that? I have one verse. There's obviously tons of verses in the Bible about God's overwhelming love for us. I think of John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. God so loved the world that he gave, but that's a different thing. But no, I found one verse that kind of lines up with what I'm saying. This one was the tougher one to find. And maybe there's something in the Bible that I'm just not aware of. I don't know. If you know something, then cool, show me. But I'm sure there's verses in the Bible that would back up what I'm saying. So Jeremiah 31:3, the Lord has appeared of old to me, saying, yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness, I have drawn you. So that's it. Just very simple thing. It's just tenderness, kindness. I mean, Psalms definitely has a lot of verses about God's long suffering, his patience, his mercy, and his tender kindness, something like that, or something. I'm mixing up some words, but so there you go. The next one, this is another unpleasant one. We've got a few more, and then we'll wrap up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more. Well, maybe not a few more. It's a lot. I'm trying to give you guys a lot of good tools, Don't give them yes until they comply with no. But make sure you have plenty of opportunities for yeses. What do I mean by that? If a kid can't learn to respond to no, they're just going to have a hard time with life. Being told no and seeing how somebody responds to that, you can really tell a lot about a person. So this kind of goes back to earlier about the self-control and the patience and not being angry or whatever. Because if I tell my kids no and they throw a fit, throw a tantrum, start arguing with me, start trying to convince me, start trying to do this, no. The answer is no. And you have to stick to your guns. You have to. And again, I don't have a verse on this one. I'm sure I could find one. I didn't bother looking one up. This one was kind of a complicated one. But again, I feel like I still go back to the Israelites because, God told him he wasn't going to give him any kind of food or anything, just the manna. And then he was like, okay, fine, I'm going to give you guys some quail. But then he poisoned the quail. So I don't know. And that may be a stretch. So all that to say is they have to have the opportunity to hear no and respond to no. Because when they act out, then yes, you have the ability to correct or what have you, or teach them why, which we'll get into that in a moment. But then when I say give them plenty of yeses, you got to give them wins. If they never have a win, they're going to feel undefeated. So what I mean by yeses, okay, like, are there some things that I probably would say no, but it's probably not going to hurt if I say yes? Sure. Daddy, can I have this sucker? Did you already have a candy today? No. Well, I really want you to have it after dinner, but you know what? It's fine. Dinner's in like a half hour. You are going to eat all of your dinner, but I'll let you have that sucker right now. That's a yes. Okay? That's a simple yes. Well, a little elaborate, but you get it. And those are things. So look for opportunities for yes. But when you say no, they will respond or react. Kids will probably react. They will likely react to it. And that's where you have to stand your ground. This goes back to your words, having authority and power, and not changing just because you feel bad. If you said it, you have to do it. So this next one, don't lie to your kids about anything. About Santa Claus, about the Easter Bunny, about any nonsense, about why the sky is blue and just making stuff up. Don't lie to them. If you don't know, tell them, I don't know. That would be a better answer than anything else. You will see that Jesus never, ever lied. Remember, who is the father of all lies? That would be Satan. I want nothing to do with Satan. I want nothing to do with his ways, his schemes, his lies, his manipulation. I want nothing to do with it. So why am I saying that? Because I keep reemphasizing your words and standing by them. Now, what I've heard many parents do, parents will say crazy things like, if you don't clean your room, I'm going to make you sleep outside. That is a lie. You would never make them sleep outside. Now, if you are that parent that makes them sleep outside, okay, fine. I mean, whatever. So yes, make sure that you're sticking to what you say. So if you say that I'm going to do said thing, and then you don't do said thing, again, you have diminished your own words, and your kids realize that it's okay, that they can get away with it, that there's no punishment or whatever. So make sure you are not lying to your children about anything. Keep the truth inside of you. If you want your kids to be honest with you, then you've got to be honest with them. I've heard parents say things like, see, this is why you don't do this thing, because the monster's going to grab you under the bed or whatever, like crazy things that I've heard. And I'm just like, what? Why would you say that? For one, it's not true. And for two, you're like scaring your children with some nonsense, like whatever. But anyways, so there's that. All right. The next part in the unpleasant discipline is don't spoil and allow them to appreciate things. Just allow them to be appreciative. Now, there's no one direct verse that would come out and say something specifically to this effect, but as I already mentioned from the Old Testament, a lot of the dads were complacent with the upbringing of their children and they weren't proactive. And then you can see the example of this when the kid turned to a teenager or an adult and how they would respond or speak to the parent as if they were the authority and as if they had the final say. And that is not the case, and that's how it should not be. So I think, there's a definition. We'll look up the definition real quick in the English language, but I think defining spoiling or defining the word spoil will be different for a lot of people if I had to make an assumption. For me, it's just giving the kids what they want. I think that to me is what spoiling is. That's what I would define it as. Now, I'm not saying that is the actual definition. So let's read it. The Webster says, to impair the disposition or character of by overindulgence or excessive praise, to pamper excessively or to coddle. So, yeah, I mean, that all kind of makes sense. That's one side of it. And you know, yeah, let me put a pin on that. But as I was saying, it's just to give the kid what they want instead of what they need, and not putting discipline when discipline is necessary. Again, that's the way I look at spoiling. But you know, there's two verses, so I'm going to read one verse, and then another one just popped in my head, of course, and that was with Joseph. When Joseph got his Technicolor coat. Let's look up that verse really quick, okay? The story of Joseph when he gets his coat is going to be in Genesis chapter 37. And we'll start in verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So you could read the rest of the story where this goes, but this was one of my examples I use about bad examples of fathers of, you know, loving a kid over another. That's unfair. You should never do that. You should love your kids equally. You should treat your kids equally. This, though, to me, in this scenario, or this, you know, application, this seems like he spoiled his kid by giving him a special coat. Because you have to understand, during that time frame, people weren't wearing coats. The people that were wearing coats were royalty. The people that were wearing coats were people that didn't have to work or didn't have to labor. And especially because I believe it said, I don't know, I read this, so maybe I'm reading into this, or maybe I read it somewhere that the coat went down to the edge of his palms, or like to his sleeves, or, you know, it was a full length coat or something like that. So I might be making that up. I'm not sure. But again, if that's the case, that represents that he doesn't have to work, right? If you're out in the field working and slaving all day and sweating and whatnot, you don't want these long sleeve, you know, heavy coats, whatever. You want to be light, and, you know, the sun's beating down. Anyways, you get the picture. So that, to me, would be a prime example of spoiling your kid. And then we see what happens. The brothers get involved, and hopefully you know the rest of the story. Not good. Not good. Don't do that. But the specific verse that I have in mind, and I suppose we could interpret it in different ways. Let's go ahead there. That's going to be Proverbs 29:15. Now, I'm sure I've already read this verse because I'm regurgitating a lot of verses, but I'm bringing different applications, and I'm bringing different insight through these verses. The rod and rebuke give wisdom. That's the opposite of spoiling. But a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. So it doesn't come right out and say that you're spoiling them. And this could be interpreted as just like letting them be and figure it out on their own, which that's not good either. But I kind of see a situation where they're spoiling the child, where they're just letting them be and letting them get what they want and do what they want, and there's no instruction or no direction whatsoever have you. And the only reason why I say that is because of the first part of the verse, because the rod and rebuke give wisdom. So that means they're not disciplining their child. So again, I don't need to beat that up. We can move on. I feel like I spent too much time on that. Let's move on to the next one. Hey, don't spoil your kids. It's a good thing to not spoil them. We don't want them rotten when they get older, right? All right, next one. They need to learn how to take care of things. Like, they don't get bigger and better things if they keep breaking like the basic things. And the verse that comes with that, and this is a very simple one, this should be very obvious, but again, this kind of goes along with spoiling. Remember, I'm trying to do these in kind of an order. If you're spoiling your kids, you're just constantly giving them whatever they want and overindulgence and what have you, and it doesn't matter if they break it. You can just buy something new. It's replaceable. Great, fine, whatever. But I see this verse. Let's go to it. Luke 16:10. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. And he who is unjust in what is least is also unjust in much. This is just a simple example. I think this is anything in life, and this is how the Lord treats us. He doesn't give us, like, a lot of us have dreams and visions and goals, or we want to have these big things, or if you've ever started a business, you may have these big dreams and plans and whatnot. But you always have to have like baby steps and things to get towards that. I mean, there's a few unicorns where they can accelerate in a year or two and they're just taking off and they're blowing up or whatever. And that's amazing. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, it takes hard work, it takes time, it takes endurance, patience, what have you. So if we're constantly just replacing those things because they don't care about it, they're not going to learn the lesson from it, and they're going to keep making the same mistake. And so, as I was saying, the Lord, I feel he does this with us. He wants to make sure that we're faithful in little things before he gives us the bigger things or the greater things or what have you. So if he's asked us to be obedient in something, then be obedient in that thing and take those baby steps and follow and trust his guidance. And then from there, he'll give you something greater. But how does this go along with a kid? Same thing. If they keep breaking their toys, don't keep buying them the same toys. They need to appreciate that thing. They need to appreciate it. And where I'm going with this is eventually we're going to get to the teenage years. And I know of, anecdotal, but I knew in high school, a lot of kids, their parents bought them cars and they wrecked them or they got stolen or something happened to their cars or what have you. They didn't care. It wasn't a big deal to them because their parents were used to just buying them things over and over again, and they had no responsibility that went with it. So I think that's pretty obvious. I don't need to beat that up. Just keep that in mind. But if you just allow them to be and not trust them, I mean, they're not going to take care of that stuff down the road, and it's going to get sloppy and disorganized. And over time, somebody's going to get frustrated because you're like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's always okay. It's okay. No, it's not. Like, correct them. Discipline them. Correct them. Don't spoil them. Next one, in the unfavorable. Be decisive and be matter of fact. I think there's a lot of times in the Bible where the Lord does this. I kind of mentioned this about like one command one time earlier. And what I mean by this is just when you're asking for things, and this may be redundant, but be specific, be matter of fact, tell them exactly what it is. Don't, if you're letting them learn or grow or whatever, and you're trying to like see how they feel or play it out to let them experience and grow, that's fine. I'm all for that. And again, we'll get to that. But if there are tasks and things that need to be done, then be very specific, be matter of fact. I already kind of gave you those examples with the one command, one time, simple commands, very few words. So the verse that really comes to mind with this is James 1:6. And it says, but let him ask in faith with no doubting. For if he doubts, he is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. If you're not matter of fact in the things that you request or state or say or what have you, if you're kind of wishy-washy, like kind of like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings, I'm not sure how they'll respond. Again, you're the parent, you're the authority, you've got to be proactive, you've got to be decisive. I don't want to raise wishy-washy kids that are tossed to and fro about the wind, that can't make a decision. Like, I'm a go with the flow person, but I know that bugs my wife a lot. And I know for probably a lot of women in marriage, if they want their husband to be a leader, if he's a go with the flow guy or just easygoing, whatever, passive guy, they're like, I would rather somebody more decisive. Like, something my wife hates that I say is when I say sure. Well, what is sure? I don't know. Sure. Sure means yes. She's like, then why don't you say yes? I don't know. Now, I'm not trying to get into communication in marriage, but to the point, I think you get it. You can use, sloppy words, sloppy phrasing, and things of that nature. Be decisive with your kids. Teach them that confidence. Teach them those things, and let them see it from you. They're going to respect your words and respect your authority when you're decisive and concise. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. This is a fresh one. Actually, I just typed this one up because of something that we're dealing with our kiddos right now. Don't pose a question if you want a specific result or a specific response. I don't have a verse for this. I actually looked one up. Couldn't find anything on it. Maybe there's something out there. I'm sure there is. God's asked plenty of questions throughout the Bible, but those were times where he was trying to see how the person would respond and what they wanted and things of that nature. I found a few verses, but again, I don't think it lines up with what the picture I'm trying to paint. Job 42:4. That might be our one. Yeah, this is Job answering the Lord. Yeah, and he's giving him a rebuttal to what God was previously asking him. Yeah, I love these verses for different reasons, but yeah, maybe that, but let's just read it. It just says, listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you and you shall answer me. So that was God, I suppose, probably in a previous chapter saying these things. So he wanted a specific response. God wanted a specific response, and he wasn't trying to give him an open thing. So anyways, but whatever, let me give you the example of this. And what I'm saying is, so lately what we've been doing with our kids, we're like, hey, you want to take your gummies now? You want to take your vitamins now? Whatever that may be. Right? Well, what do you think they're going to say? Probably no. No, I actually need you to take it now. Well, that's a very different thing. So just, if you don't ask the question if you want a specific response, that's all. Just simply state it. Say, hey, I want you to take your medicine now. And this goes along with what I was just saying about being decisive, being matter of fact. That's all. If you pose the question, again, what are you doing? You're giving the kid the opportunity to answer, which we're going to lead into the next problematic issue that we need to correct and nip in the bud. Don't pose the question. Just tell them what it is that you need them to do. Okay? So that leads into the next one. Don't have to explain your reasons why. This is a big one. I remember growing up and hearing about this. My parents would always say, I don't have to tell you why, or it's because I said so, or just because, or whatever the answer was. And I'm sure all of us as kids have heard this. And I remember growing up thinking, I'm going to teach my kids that, and tell them and give them a reason and explain to them. But the Lord said, no, not a good idea. That's not a good idea. And being a parent now, I see why. It opens up for arguments. You got to remember, kids are very crafty. They're very smart, and they can figure things out. They won't manipulate you. They will. They will try to get their way. Remember, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. We're trying to get that out of them. But if I'm starting to give them reasons why. Now, people have fought me on this one too. This is another big one people have fought me on. And I think there's a time and place, which we'll get into the next section. There's time and place for that stuff. But when you're trying to get them to follow directions and follow orders and do commands and listen to you and be obedient and all of these things that we want our kids to do, then yes, there's no reason, there's no rhyme or reason to give them a why. Just because I need you to be obedient. And we can see this time and time again in Scripture. I don't have any specific examples offhand, but we can see time and time again where God was just like, do this thing. And then the people would be like, why, God? And he didn't even answer. He's just like, I literally gave you a command. And that's it. And even Jesus in the New Testament, like I've already used this earlier about one command, one time. He's like, go to the other side. Well, the disciples didn't think anything of it, right? They weren't arguing with him. He just gave them the command, and that was that. But I do think that there were times where the disciples were trying to figure things out. And there were times that the Lord answered that. And like I said, we'll get into that. But when you were trying to get them to just be submissive and be obedient and just listen, there's no time for whys or questions. And your kids will ask you. But what will happen, like I already said, is they will start to figure out holes in your argument. Kids, turn off the TV. Why, Dad? Because I said so. Yeah, but we don't have anything to do. It doesn't matter. Now you've posed the argument. Now they're trying to find ways to manipulate you and get outside of it. It doesn't matter. Yeah, but Dad, it's nighttime. We can't go outside and play. I don't care. I just want you to turn the TV off. Yeah, but what if we play for 5 minutes or do this or that or the other, and then we can come back and watch TV, right? They're trying to find a reason around it. Already, they shouldn't even be getting to that point, but kids will do that, and you got to be patient with them. If you're heavy-handed there, and you don't let them get to that point, that's on you, I suppose. But I mean, I'm okay with them asking. That's fine. I'm not going to scold them for just asking the question, but I don't have to give them a reason. That's all that I'm simply trying to say. There's no reason to be giving. Again, our goal is to get them to respect our authority and respect our words. And by doing these things, you will achieve both of these things. But stick to your guns, okay? Next one. We're almost done with the unfavorable section. So the next one. Actually, I think this is the last one I have. Don't stoop to their level. Authority stands tall. What do I mean by that? There's another one growing up. Your parents were always towering over you. The authority figures, the adults, whoever it was, were always towering over you. And lately, what I have seen, especially recently, are these parents bending down to their kids' level and explaining why and just coddling them, right? Spoiling them. And just thinking that they're helping their child by getting to their level because they're being compassionate or empathetic or sympathetic or filling whatever the word may be. That is completely backwards. Again, I don't know of a time, unless somebody was terribly suffering, that God went and got down to somebody's level. The only time I can see this, because I'm sure people are like, Jesus, when he got down and wrote in the stone or whatever, and he wrote in the dirt, and he got down to the woman's level, the woman caught in adultery, yeah, that she was about to die. Her life was about to end. She didn't come to Jesus being like, hey, Jesus, will you spoil me? No, that was a completely different situation. So don't use that as a straw man. It's very, very, it's anecdotal and it's not related to this. What I'm talking about, again, is kids seeing you as the authority figure. When you're towering over them, it doesn't mean you have to be like, oh, look at me, I'm big and bad or whatever. No, when you're towering over them, you're showing a point of authority. You are not bending the knee to them. What that portrays is that they are the king and the queen, and that you are submitting to them by bowing to them. And you should not be doing that. Again, these are all subtle nuances, and people say, it's not a big deal. No, kids pick up on behavioral patterns. Where do you think they get all of these things from? Again, when the kids get older, all you have to do is look at the adult and you know where it came from, why they were allowed to do it, how they got away with certain things, why they're lying, why they're cheating, why they're doing this, why they're doing that, why they're snarky, why they're whatever, fill in the blank, because their parents were that way. And that was the example that was presented to them. So to wrap this whole unfavorable section up, this is a big one. Just don't do it. Stand tall, stay over them. You don't have to be like mean-spirited and fold your arms and because I'm the fair, whatever. And I do that with my girls at times when they're trying to question me or try to get me to come to the level or something. And I'm like, no. I'm like, what can I help you with? And I'll stand my ground and I will let them know I'm the authority. And when they question it or they come after it, they're like trying to tell me that they're in charge or no. I will quickly remind them, you are not in charge, kid. You are not in charge. You don't have the final say. I do, right? And that's just how it goes because I'm their authority figure. I want them to honor and respect me. The same way we're training them in the ways they should go, because if they're going to have a relationship with the Lord, there are going to be times I think that the Lord's going to stand over them in that way and have to answer them in such a way, because things are hard or things are challenging or things are maybe not going the way that they had hoped or planned, right? Anyways, hopefully that makes sense. Let's wrap that entire unpleasant section up, or unfavorable, I should say, unfavorable, unpleasant section. And now let's go over to the fun stuff. Let's go to the fun side. This is the fun side of training our kids and practical application and better discipline, graceful discipline, if you will, right? That's kind of the harsher stuff. You get it. Let's go to the favorable.